When we look back at some of the shortest players in NBA history, we have players like Spud Webb, Muggsy, Bogues, and Nate Robinson, but none of them reached the level unlike Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas was a 5'9" point guard out of the University of Washington, and during his college years, he was a solid 15 to 16 points per game scorer, and while he wasn't the best defender, he made up for it with his offensive talents. His most notable memory while he was in college was his legendary step-back game-winning shot versus Arizona in the Pac-10 championship. That was the moment where Isaiah Thomas would gain respect from his peers.
Okay, I might have to go to the step back. This is my chance. And that was like a moment that, I'm going to cherish forever, for sure.
He would later enter the 2011 NBA draft, and he was the last pick of the second round, where he was selected by the Sacramento Kings. While every team passed up on him, the Kings gave him a chance, and he would use it as fuel and motivation to prove himself. His rookie season was a solid showing of what he could do. He would make the all-rookie second team, averaging around 11 points and 4 rebounds. While this was during the lockout year, Isaiah showed what he could do when given an opportunity. His sophomore season, his numbers would jump up to 14 points and 4 assists on 44, 36, 88 splits, and he had a bigger role with the team as he would start 62 games for the Kings that year, and he was improving as a scorer. But he would take the massive jump in the 2013-14 season as he would average 20 points and 6 assists on 45, 35, 85 splits, and he was coming into his own as a player, and he was becoming the Kings' second best player behind DeMarcus Cousins. His best game of the season would come against the Oklahoma City Thunder. While the Kings lost the game, Isaiah Thomas would proceed to drop a career-high 38 points on 61% shooting. This would show that he was more than just a small guard, but a lethal shooter and a playmaker. But sadly, he would be traded in a sign-and-trade during the offseason to the Phoenix Suns that were a solid team in the Western Conference, but there was only one issue. The Suns had 2 other point guards in Eric Bledsoe and Goran Dragic, so that raised the question of what his role was going to be with the team. The start of the 2014-15 season, Isaiah's numbers would decrease to 15 points, and he was not the starting point guard for the team as he would only start in 1 game for the Suns. He unfortunately received the short end of the stick, no pun intended, when it came to playing time. Then to make matters worse, the Suns would trade him to the Boston Celtics after a few months of trying this experiment. It seemed like Isaiah Thomas was not given the opportunity to truly show his potential. The Kings tried, but then they would eventually trade him, and the Suns were doomed from the start when they already had 2 point guards, and they didn't even seem like they wanted to give Isaiah Thomas a chance.
But it was before, now where 3 or 4 guards can play with each other at the same time. We had Dragic, Bledsoe, me. We also had Gerald Green, too. They trying to pay Dragic, so they're going to be hot, if they don't end the game. So, and then I get traded in the middle of the year to where it was a blessing in disguise. Obviously, I get traded to Boston.
But once he landed on the Boston Celtics, he would prove to everyone who ever doubted him why he was so great. While the Boston Celtics were at the time out of the playoff race, Isaiah Thomas would be the spark that would light a fire under the Boston Celtics as they would finish the season with a 20-9 record, and Thomas would be a major contributor as to why they made a playoff push. While on the bench, he would average 19 points and 5 assists for the Boston Celtics, and they would enter the playoffs as the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. And even though the Boston Celtics would lose to the Cavs in a sweep, the Celtics would build from this, and they would massively improve in the following year. The 2015-16 season would see the rise of Isaiah Thomas as he would take a massive leap as he would be the starting point guard for the Celtics and their leader after the impact he had on the team in the previous season. Isaiah Thomas would finally receive the recognition he deserves as he was finally put in a place where he could shine. He would become an all-star for the team for the first time in his career, and he would become the most loved player in Boston. The Celtics were improving more and more, and while not the best team in the Eastern Conference, they were a force to be reckoned with. Their most notable performance as a team would come when they would be one of the 9 teams to beat the Golden State Warriors, and Isaiah Thomas would hit the dagger in the 4th quarter to give the Warriors their 8th loss of the season.
Almost threw it away. Thomas has it, goes to the basket and scores.
Isaiah Thomas and the Boston Celtics would finish the season with a 48-34 record, and they would face the Atlanta Hawks in the first round, and Isaiah Thomas's rise to stardom would continue to skyrocket. While the Hawks did beat the Boston Celtics in 6 games, his most notable performance would be in Game 3 where he would drop 42 points, and while the Celtics were once again a first round out, no one knew how great of a season he was going to have and how beloved he would be in the city of Boston during his 2017 run, because it was a legendary and one for the ages. Isaiah Thomas going into the 2016-2017 season had expectations to repeat the same success as he did in the previous year, and he would not disappoint. Isaiah Thomas would have an MVP-like season, and he would have amazing performances in the regular season, most notably his 52 points against the Miami Heat in a 3-point victory, which would be his career high. He was amazing in that game, especially in the 4th quarter where he would drop 29 points. Isaiah during that season was very clutch, and he was even crowned the nickname King of the 4th quarter. He was the league leader in most points scored in the fourth with 684 points, even beating out Russell Westbrook by 3 points. Isaiah Thomas would be named an All-Star once again, and the status of IT grew more and more, and he would still perform at a high level, and he was having an MVP caliber season, and the Celtics would finish the season as the first seed for the first time since the Big Four Celtics era. Isaiah Thomas would finish the season 5th in MVP voting. He was voted All-NBA second team, 3rd in total points, 3rd in points per game, 2nd in offensive win shares, and 2nd in offensive box plus minus. He was statistically having the best season of his career, and he was finally in a place where he can call home. The Celtics would come into the playoffs ready for battle, especially Isaiah Thomas, as he would become a Celtics icon and a beloved amongst fans, as he would have something to fight for. As tragedy would strike on April 15th, a day before the first round against the Chicago Bulls, was the unexpected passing of Isaiah Thomas' sister, China Thomas. Basketball was definitely the last thing he could possibly be thinking about, but the true testament of someone's tenacity and strength is pushing through even through hard times, and for him to be hit with such terrible news and still play deserves so much love and respect from fans. While the Bulls were up 2-0, the Celtics were able to overcome a 2-0 deficit with IT leading the charge, and the Celtics would win and finally make it past the first round for the first time since 2013. Then the Boston Celtics would face the Washington Wizards, and this series was entertaining as both teams were going at it physically, and they were not a fan of each other. The trash talk was at an all-time high, and the altercations were definitely at an all-time high. But Isaiah Thomas would have an amazing series, and he would dominate in Game 2, dropping 53 points and a 10-point victory, and he would dedicate this game to his sister as she would have turned 23. This was by far one of the greatest playoff performances in NBA history, and Isaiah Thomas deserved the love and praise. The Celtics, while heading into a Game 7, would defeat the Wizards off of a Kelly Olynyk and Isaiah Thomas performance, torching the Wizards, and they would head into the Eastern Conference Finals, where they would face the Cleveland Cavaliers, who were the defending champions at the time. But unfortunately, Isaiah Thomas would be sidelined after suffering a hip injury in Game 2, and then Isaiah Thomas would end up getting surgery and he would miss the rest of the playoffs, and the Celtics would lose in 5 games. Then he would sadly be traded to the Cavs in the offseason, which was very heartbreaking as he gave everything he had to the organization and they still traded him.
Then I get traded to Cleveland. So that's what hurt me the most. If I wasn't injured and I got traded, I would be like, cool, I'm not tripping. Shit, I'm going to play with Bron. The fact that I was injured hurt me. And the fact that they knew how bad my hip was and to trade me on that hurt.
But while his prime was short-lived, he had one of the best success stories in recent memory. And he would let everyone know while he was the smallest on the court, he had the biggest heart. He was not supposed to be where he was. He was the last pick in the NBA draft. He was bouncing around from team to team. Teams never gave him a chance, but he never gave up, and he was fueled by motivation to prove himself to everyone, and against all odds, he did. I may not be a Celtics fan, but he was truly a beloved Celtic. He would make the Celtics relevant for the time he was there. He would become an all-star and their leader for the organization. He would lead them to the playoffs after they were going through a rebuild stage before he got traded there, to being the first seed for the first time since the Big Four Celtics era. And I actually made a video about the Big Four Celtics and talked about how great they were, so go check that out. But in the meantime, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Until then, I'll see y'all next time. NBA Nerd out.